to us is acute watery diarrhea. But before starting, I would like to thank all the honorable dignitaries from the IAP Tamil Nadu chapter, as well as P. Ramachandran sir, who has given us the opportunities, and also the Department of Pediatrics of Sri Ramachandra Institute of Higher Education. I am Manisha Chaudhary, I'm the chief presenter, and I'm supported by two of my colleagues, Usama Arbab and Harsh Jain. So beginning with it, the case is Santosh, who's a 2-year-old male child coming from Kanchipuram, who's brought by his mother. The reliability of the mother is good. He comes with the chief complaints of loose stools since the past 3 days, history of vomiting since the past 1 day, and reduced oral intake for the past 1 day. History of presenting illness. The child had a history of loose stools for the past 3 days, there was 5 to 6 episodes of the stools which were watery in consistency. It was not mucoid or blood stained. He also complained of vomiting since the past 1 day. He had 2 to 3 episodes of vomiting in the past 1 day, and it was immediately after food. It was non-projectile and it contained food particles. It was non-bilious and did not have blood. He also complained of history of reduced oral intake since the past 1 day. The child had a history of outside food intake, which was 3 days back. He has increased thirst, and the mother also says that the child has a history of pica, which is that he has been eating chalk and other cementy substances. He has no history of reduced urine output, no history of fever. The child has no history of crying during micturition, no history of recent travel or contact with COVID positive cases. This is a very important history or the question which we should ask considering the present time of the pandemic. The child also has decreased activity since the past 2 days. The child was taken to a nearby PHC 2 days ago, where he was given ORS and medications, and some supplementation was advised by the medical officer at the PHC. The mother continued to give cow's milk, and it was given to the baby through the bottle.
Just a second, Manisha. Can you just go back to the previous slide?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So I'll just. So,
usually we don't interrupt when you present the cases, but because it's an academic session, we would like to just tell you what are the things that is important and in each step of your history. Okay.
Yes.
So what are the inferences that you have got from the history as of now, Manisha?
Yes, sir. So, sir, we can say 2 things. One, that is the child had vomiting and loose stool. So it is something which is related to the GIT. So second, like the vomiting which the child had was non-projectile. So therefore, if we can rule out the CNS causes, basically like meningitis or any irritative pathology of the CNS system. So also, sir, like the vomiting was non-bile-stained. So we can say that it was it was not bile-stained. So therefore, it is more related to the stomach and the first part of duodenum, and it is not like the second part of duodenum where the bile enters. And it is like there's no liver pathology or anything. And so reduced oral intake and reduced activity of the child suggests that the child is lethargic.
Yes, but for every, just go back to the previous slide. For every other case, you need not have a very elaborate differential diagnosis, Manisha. You can just common things are very common. No, commonly when you have a vomiting and diarrhea, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
So it can be due to any food allergy or any, Yes, sir.
Most commonly, it is an acute gastroenteritis. That is the common symptoms. So certain other differential diagnosis can be there, but you need not have an elaborate differential diagnosis. What undergraduates usually do is they have a very long list of negative history, which is not necessary. If you're very sure of what you're dealing with, you can go ahead with a few negative histories alone. So what is our idea of this history to find out whether it is an acute episode or is a chronic episode? What's your take on that?
So it's an acute episode, sir.
Yes, number one is that. Okay. Then following the intake of food, the duration of the onset of the symptoms. What is your take on this?
So it was followed by the intake of food, sir. So therefore, we can think that it's an irritative in nature, sir.
More than irritative, you take some food, you come back from a hotel or somewhere, or you have the child takes some food and starts to vomit immediately after an hour or two. So what does that mean? And the child develops symptoms 2 or 3 days later after having a food from outside. What is the difference between these two things?
Sir, after, if the child is developing it after 2 to 3 days, sir, so sir, we can say that it is so it is the food was infected, and therefore like probably bacteria or viral infected food was
Yes.
consumed, and therefore the symptoms developed 2 to 3 days later,
Okay,
sir.
accepted. But immediately after the food, if the patient develops an episode of vomiting and suddenly becomes dehydrated, what else will you suspect?
So we can
We have some disturbances in the audio of a few other attendees. Can you please mute yourselves? Yes. Go on, Manisha.
yes, sir. So if the patient developed it immediately after having food, it is more towards any allergic substance which was there in the food which caused the symptom.
Yes, more than allergy, Monisha, you should think of an enterotoxin which is preformed and present already there in the diet. So there you should suspect a Staph aureus food poisoning.
Staph
That is
aureus,
what I
yes.
want you to take home messages. Immediately after you consume food, you develop symptoms. It is probably a acute episode of Staphylococcus aureus or Bacillus cereus food poisoning. So these are two organisms which can develop symptoms within a duration of an hour or two. Okay.
Yes, sir.
After, if they develop the symptoms 2 or 3 days later, probably you think of a viral etiology or a bacterial etiology or a protozoal etiology.
Yes, sir.
So these three things you should try to differentiate now. So from the history, you tell me how will you differentiate viral, bacterial, and protozoal?
So like viral, so because the symptoms develop, like he had consumed outside food 3 days back, and after which he is developing the symptoms, which is a little more towards viral, and it's not immediately, sir. And sir, like if it's to rule out parasitic, he has no history of so like this is a very acute episode, that is it's happened only 3 days ago. So for a parasitic infection, it will be the history will be more suggestive of a longer duration.
Now I'll tell you a clue, Manisha. See, more of vomiting, the consistency of stool is loose, watery, and the volume and the quantity also is higher. Is this viral or
Yes, sir.
bacterial?
So
It's
can you
more of
repeat? Your voice
vomiting.
is breaking. Yes,
More
sir.
of vomiting. The volume of stools are higher. It is loose, watery in nature. The number of stools are also higher. More of vomiting. Low grade fever. Is it viral or bacterial?
So viral.
Yes. So that is the clue for that. So bacterial, I'll tell you a clue. Abdominal pain, less quantity of stools, blood and mucus in stools, tenesmus, high grade fever. What is this?
So bacterial, more towards
So
bacterial.
that is the group of symptoms which helps you to differentiate whether it is viral or bacterial. And
Bacterial,
you can
yes.
also take into account the age. Suppose it's an infant 6 months old, which organism is more common, viral or bacterial?
So six. So there's a little bit of background noise, sir.
Yes,
I cannot hear your voice
yeah.
properly, sir.
Are you able to hear me now?
Doctor,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
please mute, please.
um, 6 months old infants are more commonly infected by viruses or bacteria.
So 6 months old, it's more common to be of viral origin,
Yes,
sir.
older children can develop protozoal infections, no? About 2 years,
Yes, sir.
or adolescents, we are more prone to develop entomobacteriaceae. If you develop diarrhea, will you think of rotavirus for ourselves?
No, sir. No, sir. We will
So
not think
age
of
also
rotavirus.
has to
Yes, sir.
play an important role in that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So first you decide whether it's acute or chronic. The second one that you've got from the history is whether it is going to be a viral etiology, whether it is going to be a bacterial etiology or a protozoal etiology, or very rarely if it's a non-infectious cause. Okay. Are you there, Manisha? Ilamaran sir, audible arkan sir?
Sir, audible, sir. Your
Okay,
voice
Manisha,
is clear.
are you there, Manisha? I think she's gone. It's not in the network.
The other presenters can respond then.
Yeah, Harsh, are you there? Usama? Yeah, just follow these things. No, first thing we said acute or chronic. Then we wanted to know the etiology of an infection. And the third thing from the history, what would you like to know is whether there are signs of dehydration from the history. Tell me what histories you will ask for signs of dehydration. I mean, not signs for dehydration. What history you will ask the mother to know whether it is a severe dehydration or it's some dehydration or there is no dehydration.
So am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. You're back now.
Okay. Yes, sir. So I was actually, so it showed that the host has removed me.
It's okay.
Yes, sir. So Yes, sir. So I'll ask for the signs of, so whether the child is drowsy, lethargic, or
Yes.
how is the child, so the general nature of the child, is there any drastic change since how he was before the symptoms had appeared? So I would also ask the mother if she's seen any characteristic change in the way the child has been looking. So like if the
It's very
child...
simply, you just have to ask three things, Manisha. Whether the child is drinking fluids eagerly, or it's not at all drinking, or it's drinking normally, number one. Number two,
Yes,
whether
sir.
the child is having a drowsiness or altered sensorium. Number three is whether the child has a proper urine output. Finished. With these three things, you can know whether it is a no dehydration, some or a severe dehydration. Drowsiness,
Yes, sir.
not drinking at all. You tell me now, what is the dehydration?
So
Drowsy,
drowsiness, not drinking at all,
yes.
it's a severe
Yeah.
dehydration, sir.
Drinking eagerly, mildly lethargic.
It's moderate, some
Some
dehydration.
dehydration. Drinking normally, there is no letharginess. Child is responding to commands and interacting properly.
No dehydration,
So
sir.
with the history itself, you will know whether it is an acute or a chronic diarrhea, whether the cause is what, and whether there is dehydration or not. Three things you have gone through. The fourth one
Yes, sir.
that you have to ask in the history is the complications of diarrhea or dehydration. How will you ask in history?
So the complications. So if the child is having, so like if he's having fever, or if he's having seizures, if so like, because the most common
Yes.
complications are hypoglycemia. So if the child has lost a lot of weight since the past,
No. What
since
is
the
the
time he has,
reason of seizure in acute gastroenteritis?
so like there's an electrolyte disbalance, sir,
Correct.
as well as hypoglycemia because of severe dehydration.
Not very
As a
common.
result,
Electrolyte disturbance is the first one. The second one is what? Fever and seizures. What is the first thing that strikes your mind?
some meningitis.
First thing before that, a common thing which will not infect the central nervous system, but the child will have a fever and a seizure.
Febrile seizure.
Yes. So Sama has told it right. The number two is febrile seizure. Number three, suppose there is a dysentery and the child has a seizure. You will think of some particular organism that there is some complication.
Shigella.
Sorry,
Yes.
hemolytic uremic.
Yes. So you should think of a
Uremicin.
Shigella encephalopathy. And there is severe dehydration. There is hyperviscosity. So what else can develop?
So can you repeat once again?
Hyperviscosity. There is, because of dehydration, the circulation of the blood becomes much slower. So what will it precipitate to?
Renal abnormality, renal failure.
Thrombosis. So that also can cause seizure. So whenever an AG child is having a seizure, you think of these 4 or 5 conditions: febrile seizures, electrolyte imbalances, your thrombotic complications, and whether they have developed any Shigella encephalopathy. These are all the common things. So you have come to the history, you have found out all these things. So with your history, you tell us in short what you have got from these 4 things which I asked you.
So it's an acute case, probably pointing towards viral etiology.
Okay.
The child has no signs of any complications, and it is a case of some dehydration, sir.
Okay, good. So, madam and Ilamaran sir, if you'd like to add something.
What are the danger signs you are able to identify from the history? What the mother is saying? Any danger signs which you will address?
Ma'am, as of now, ma'am, till the histories we have discussed, ma'am, there are no danger signs which the child has been showing. The child is thirsty and he's taking feeds, but is a little mildly lethargic, sir, ma'am. So, ma'am, till now there is no danger sign.
As per the IMNC guidelines, there are some danger signs which what you will look in a child with diarrhea.
Ma'am, if there is any blood in stools, if the child has any fever, if there's abdominal distension, and if like there is more frequency of stools, or the consistency of stool is more towards watery, like it's become more watery, then these are the few danger signs which we see.
The vomiting and not unable to take feed. These are the 2 things, along with the convulsion and feed, you have to look for the danger signs. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Dr. Ilamaran here.
Yes, sir.
Manisha, the history is fairly good. Okay, fairly good, and you have covered almost all the aspects. So, in summary, the idea of history taking is to get some input on what is the system, what is the probable etiology. Those we have elaborated, and of course, here the complication is dehydration. So, you have asked symptoms for dehydration, symptoms for danger signs, and all that. So. And the next will be see if there is an underlying malnutrition from history,
yes, sir.
Okay, or other complications of diarrhea. Okay, so almost like seizures, abdominal distension, altered sensorium, all those things will be the part of it. That also we have fairly covered. So
Yes,
history for etiology, history for the complications, severity, and underlying pathology. Okay, so all those parts we have covered
Yes, sir.
fairly. So the next subsequent part will tell if any demographic factors are also there. Okay.
Yes,
Good.
sir. So I'll just present my screen once again. Sir.
You can go on.
The past history, the child had a similar history, similar illness in the past about 1.5 years ago, which required hospitalization for 2 days. The mother says that he needed IV fluids. There was no ear discharge or upper respiratory tract infection, and no history which was suggestive of measles infection. Birth history, antenatal history.
Just a minute, Manisha. Can you go back
Yes,
to the
sir.
past history?
Yes, sir.
Here you are saying that there was an episode in the past and now it is the
Past.
second time that this child is getting. So
Yes, sir.
is there any reason for a child to get repeated attacks of diarrhea?
Sir, it can be because of the poor feeding habits, sir, poor hygiene, which is followed. So when we come a little more further, sir, we'll see what are the feeding habits which are
Okay,
followed.
so you have that in
Yes,
the
sir.
history of socioeconomic
Yes,
and
sir.
dietic
Yes, sir.
history. Okay, any
Yes,
other
I have.
reasons for recurrent attacks of diarrhea?
So these are the two most common histories, sir, like which I feel that is poor hygiene and poor diet. And so
How
also
can
it
you
can.
prevent these recurrent episodes?
So we can so the first thing is the 3 levels of prevention. So the primary, that is teaching mother the adequate techniques which she should follow. So, and also in the history, so we had that we saw that there's a history of bottle feeding. So,
Yes.
that is a very common history for precipitating recurrent diarrhea, sir, acute watery diarrhea, sir.
But
Yes.
if it is if the first episode was a rotavirus, can it come back again within a span of 6 months? Can they have the same rotaviral infection again?
Yes, sir, it can have.
Very rarely, it's not very common. Usually they will not get reinfected again by the same virus. It could be some other viruses or some other etiological factors. Okay, but why did you ask for history of measles?
So because measles infection is very so it's related to the watery diarrhea, sir. So because sir.
How?
So measles infection, so it reduces the immunity of the patient. So it predisposes the patient to have more GI symptoms. So.
What vitamin levels becomes less following vitamin?
So vitamin A.
So what does it do? Does it do to the GI tract?
So the epithelial, so the turnover of the epithelial in the intestines, it decreases, as a result of which the GI tract becomes more susceptible to infection. So
yes, what other micronutrient supplementation in the first episode could have prevented the second episode?
So zinc supplementation.
Okay, go on.
Birth history, in the first trimester, the pregnancy was confirmed by the urine pregnancy test at 45 days of gestation. Dating scan was done and it correlated with the estimated delivery date. Regular intake of iron and folic acid was there. There was no history of fever, rash, lymphadenopathy, no history of drug intake or irradiation or excessive vomiting, that is hyperemesis gravidarum. In the second trimester, there was no history of gestational diabetes mellitus, no history of pregnancy-induced hypertension, fever, or UTI, no history of bleeding or spotting per vaginum. The 2 doses of TT were taken and the anomaly scan was done, which showed no anomaly.
Yes.
The third trimester, there was no history of bleeding or leaking per vaginum, no history of reduced fetal movements, and the pregnancy weight gain was 10 kg, which is adequate. The natal history, it was a normal vaginal delivery at full term. The baby cried at birth, and the birth weight of the baby was 2.7 kg. The postnatal history was uneventful. The baby was breastfed within 3 hours of birth. Therefore, birth history was insignificant. Developmental history, this is before the child was having symptoms, because like we have seen that the mother said that there was reduced activity of the child. So this is before the symptoms had appeared. Gross motor, the child climbs up the stairs with 2 feet per step. Fine motor, the child is able to draw horizontal lines and strokes. Language, the language domain, the child is able to speak 2-word sentences. Social, the child tries and copies the domestic activities which the parents at home performs, that is domestic mimicry is present, and the child asks for food and water. Therefore, the child is developmentally normal for age.
Because this is acute gastroenteritis cases, we usually don't input our nose too much into these details. But normally, if you present for a development delay child or a cerebral palsy child, you have to talk about developmental age and mental age and all the other things also, Manisha. But in this particular case, it's not
Yes, sir.
essential. But remember that all your histories depends on what clinical case that you're presenting. Okay, so if
Yes,
it's
sir.
a cerebral palsy or a developmental delay, you have to concentrate more on the antenatal history and the birth and the developmental history. If it is a diarrhea child, you have to concentrate on the dietic history and the socioeconomic status.
Yes, sir.
If it's a cardiovascular child, you should concentrate more on the antenatal histories and what has happened around the birth if it is a congenital heart disease. So you have to select what case you are trying to present and accordingly elaborate the history. And don't elaborate every history for every case. That's just a take home message for you. What you have done
Okay,
is
sir.
correct. Simple development history is enough if it is a case of acute gastroenteritis. But you should be able
Okay,
to
sir.
know how to assess a developmental history in a child. What do you know? What do you understand by developmental age?
So developmental ages, so there are four basic domains for development. That is gross motor, fines, social, and language. So we see like, and so there are different criteria. Like a particular child should be able to do these one or two things like at that age. So if the child is being able to do those things, then we consider the child to be developmentally normal. And we compare it with the chronological age. So if there is any like
No, if
mismatch in between.
this is a 2-year-old child and the child is
Yes, sir.
only able to stand with support, what is the developmental age?
Yes, sir. So then the developmental age will be around 8 months, sir.
Yeah, that's what I want you to understand. That means what the child is doing is the developmental age.
Okay,
Okay,
sir.
what is the formula for intelligence questions?
So we says by the developmental age divided by the chronological age of
Not
the child, sir.
developmental age, it's the mental age.
Mental age, yes.
Yeah, that
Mental
for
age
that you
divided
need
by the chronological.
separate charts to assess your mental age. But developmental age you can assess by asking for milestones. The difference you should know.
Yes, sir.
And what are the scales that are there to assess development?
So there are two scales. So one is a definitive, and the other is the like it's a supportive. So I'm not
No,
very sure of
some
the names.
names of the scales you should be aware. No, what our Indian names are there. Some foreign names are developed countries names. So the Baroda screening test, Denver developmental screening test, Trivandrum developmental screening charts. These are all some developmental charts which are available to assess the development.
Okay, sir.
Because in an undergraduate exams you may be asked in any particular field, not only the particular case, because we know that the postgraduate have primed you everything about the case, what questions you'll be asked about AG and many other things. So you should not come with a very focused approach of only acute gastroenteritis. You should come inside the exam hall with a broad approach that you will be asked in development, you will be asked in milestones. As we all say, no, bread and butter of pediatrician is nutrition, milestones, and immunization. So these
Yes,
three
yes.
things are the basics. So whatever case is there, you study these three things properly and present. Okay, you're doing
Okay, sir.
okay. Well, I'm just trying to guide you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, go on. Madam or sir, anything you want to add?
Yes, sir. Fine, sir.
Okay, go on.
Fine, sir.
Immunization history. The child was vaccinated according to the national immunization schedule in a nearby PHC. The last vaccination was 1.5, like at the age of 1.5 years. OPV and DPT boosters were given. Optional vaccines were not taken by the child.
No, in the immunization history, what is more important in this child, Manisha? Or Usama, I try to target Usama for a few minutes. Usama, can you come in and help her?
Yes, sir.
What is
Yes, sir.
important in this immunization history?
Sir, I think we should ask for vitamin A and rotavirus vaccine
Yes,
also.
yes. When is rotavirus vaccine given?
6, 10, and 14 weeks.
Okay. What are the what is it given in the government schedule?
So now it is included.
Yes. In the past it was not there, but now it
Yes.
has been included.
Yes.
So what difference does it make to the society?
Sir, these episodes of acute viral gastroenteritis have been reduced, and majority in India, viral gastroenteritis is usually caused by rotavirus. So it helps.
But what the study says is it has reduced the severity of dehydrations.
Yes.
But the incidence has not been changed by quite a good number. But the incidence of severe dehydration has become drastically less. So what is there? The morbidity will be there, but the mortality will be better. So it has a very important vaccine which has reduced the deaths of children because of diarrhea. So there are two or three types of vaccines which you should also go in. Okay. And what complication in the past that rotavirus vaccine had? And why was it not used in the past because of this particular complication?
So is that interception?
Yes, correct. So it caused interception in a few children. So that's why they have not given this rotavirus vaccine. Which group of children you should not give rotavirus vaccine?
Sir, immunocompromised.
Yes. Okay. So that you should ask for history specifically about rotavirus vaccine, Manisha. Have they given it?
Yes, sir. So as per sir, they have given it because it's in the national immunization schedule. Sir.
So they have given everything according to the government schedule.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, go on.
What other vaccines can help in preventing the diarrhea?
Ma'am, we can give like vitamin A supplementation was given. That is also as per national immunization schedule. Ma'am, in the optional vaccines, we can give hepatitis A vaccine. Ma'am, they have shown like a significant increase, increase or actually decrease in the incidence of any gastrointestinal
hepatitis. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
For that, actually, you said the measles infection. So,
measles, yes, ma'am. MR vaccine, ma'am.
So you have, and do you routinely use cholera vaccine?
Ma'am, cholera and typhoid, that's the typhoid vaccine, ma'am, they come in the optional vaccines, but the child has not taken them.
But cholera vaccine is not routinely given because it's not,
no, ma'am, not
that very effective, and it is given because it has a very short-acting thing, and it is used only in certain endemic areas, if at all, but not routinely. It is not routinely used. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
What history you will have in cholera, Manisha, adding to what madam said? If suppose this child is a cholera diarrhea.
So the characteristics stool will be there. That is rice watery stools will be present, sir.
And the child will present with what?
So severe dehydration.
Yes. Okay, go on.
Nutritional history. The child was exclusively breastfed till the age of 4 months. There's also a history of prelactal feed, that is, child was given honey and vasambo. The child was started on cow's milk at the age of 4 months because of inadequate mother's milk. The cow's milk was diluted with water in the ratio of 1:1. The cow milk which was used was packet cow milk, and which was boiled and cooled and then given to the child through a feeding bottle. The child was, the feeding bottle was cleaned using soap and water, and the child was breastfed only till the age of 9 months. The complementary feeding was started at the age of 5 months, and the child is right now on a mixed diet. They're adding or highlighting the points, that is, a history of cow milk was present, intake of cow milk, and history of bottle feeding was present. These are the two very important of the nutrition and the nutritional point of view.
What do you infer from this? What do you understand by baby-friendly hospital initiative, Manisha?
Yes, sir. So the baby-friendly hospital initiative, sir, it's basically it's two things. So one, that is it mainly aims at starting the breastfeed as early as possible, and second, sir, like the mothers are taught how to give breastfeeding, and so the staff of the hospital is also encouraged to show the mother the right techniques of breastfeeding, as well as the packaged products. So there were previously a lot of packaged breastfeeding substitutes, etc. So in case of any undue circumstances like the mother's death, etc., so only then they are to be used. So the hospital staff is adequately trained to help the mother, sir.
In your history, have they followed these things?
No, sir, they have not followed.
So probably somebody has not given them proper advice of not starting these prelactal feeds. Okay.
Yes, so this is also a contraindication. So usually we do not till 6 months exclude the child should be exclusively breastfed. That is, only breast milk should be given to the child and nothing else. And in case the child has any other problems or develops any other disease, in that case only medicines or vitamin supplementation should be given and nothing else, not even water.
Consumption of cow's milk can cause what other problems in children in such early stages?
So it can lead to allergy.
What allergy?
So this cow milk.
Cow's milk. Protein intolerance. So there is a special condition which is called as a cow's milk protein intolerance. So when sometimes children come with you with a history of loose stools and streaky blood in the stools for a long duration, or probably a chronic diarrhea, one differential diagnosis that you should think of is a cow's milk protein intolerance. So whenever they come with chronic diarrhea, which we call when the diarrheal episode lasts for more than how many days, Usama?
14 days.
there you should think of you should remember for you to easily. I am telling you the 4 C's. No, one is cow's milk protein intolerance, celiac disease, cystic fibrosis, and congenital lactose intolerance. So these are all some of the few things are non-infectious causes which can cause diarrhea. Infectious causes, we know that giardiasis can cause a chronic diarrhea. One infectious cause which is a reason for chronic diarrhea is Giardia lamblia. Now it is called as Giardia intestinalis. Previously we used to call them as Giardia lamblia. Now the name has been changed to Giardia intestinalis. So along with that infection, if somebody asks you non-infectious causes of diarrhea, you should say cow's milk protein intolerance, probably malabsorption like celiac disease, your congenital lactose intolerance, and cystic fibrosis. One genetic disorder which commonly presents with chronic diarrhea and recurrent attacks of respiratory infection is cystic fibrosis. So you should also be in a situation to assess children who are having chronic diarrhea, not only acute diarrhea. So somebody comes with 20 days of diarrhea. These are all the things that you should think and go and approach the child in that particular manner. Yes, madam,
Yes.
sir, you want?
How do you know whether there is a immunodeficiency associated with diarrhea in your child?
Ma'am, we can ask if the child has gained adequate weight, or if the child has been losing a lot of weight in the past. If there is any other symptom which the child is coming with.
Okay. Maybe the failure to thrive with the not gaining weight, and there may be a lymphadenopathy or hepatosplenomegaly, all these things.
Any organomegaly.
Suspect immunodeficiency also. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Can go on.
Dr. Ilamaran here. I'll just add. I'd like to add here.
Please.
See, nutritional history, especially in a child with, in an infant or a young child, no, with the diarrhea, nutritional history will definitely be explored further. And as Dr. Ramanathan said, no, hospital-friendly initiatives, BFHIs will be asked. Then the routine questions will be on how's the reception, because internet.
Yeah, it's okay, sir. Your voice is audible. Maybe your video is slow, but your voice is audible.
Okay. So questions on what is exclusive breastfeeding, what is complementary feeding, what is a mixed diet, all those will definitely be asked to see how much is your depth of knowledge, and what are the IYC of infant and young child complementary feeding practices you are aware of. Okay, so that will be extra question. As we said, no prelactal feed, early initiation of breastfeeding, all those type of questions also can be asked in nutritional history. All right.
Yes.
What substance in breast milk prevents against E. coli diarrhea, Manisha?
Sir, IgA, sir.
One more thing which is very important.
PABA, IgA.
PABA is for malaria. It is not for diarrhea. Especially E. coli diarrhea will be prevented by the presence of bile salt simulated lipase, BSSL. Okay.
So should I move to the next slide?
Please.
This is a rough representation of the 24-hour recall diet chart. This is before the child was having any symptoms. This is like divided into the calories and the proteins and what the child usually takes. So this comes up to the required calorie as per the age of the child is 1050, and the child's intake is around 695, that is approximately 700 kilocalorie, and the deficit is of 350 calories. The proteins the child is taking is 14.5 grams, whereas he should take 17 grams. So there's a deficit of 3.5 grams. Family history.
What diet you should advise in diarrhea and what you should not give in diarrhea?
Sir, we give a calorie-rich diet and a less fiber diet in diarrhea, sir. And sir, we promote breastfeeding, and we promote that whatever the child has been taking, he should continue oral intake.
No, if I'm the mother, I'm asking you, can I give a fruit juice?
No. Packaged fruit juices are not to be given. The child can be given normal food, that is basically rice water with salt and ORS and any porridge with a little bit of sugar. Basically, any normal food which is calorie high plus salt.
Can I give milk?
Pardon, sir? So breast milk can be given and cow's milk also can be given.
This is a 2-year-old child, no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, is the mother still breastfeeding?
No, sir. The mother stopped breastfeeding when the
but
child was 9 months.
sometimes we have the false notion that whenever there is diarrhea, we should stop milk. So please, as undergraduates, don't take it forward from here. Always remember that milk has to be continued whenever there is diarrhea. You can never
Yes,
stop
sir.
milk, okay, unless you have a cow's
Yes,
milk
sir.
protein intolerance, where you can stop your cow's milk. Otherwise, milk has to be given.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Family
Especially
history.
undiluted.
Madam?
Especially
Yes, yes.
undiluted cow's
Yes,
milk
yes.
has to be given.
Should be given, yes.
Correct.
The child is a firstborn of non-consanguineous marriage. He lives in a nuclear family, and there is no history of similar illness in the family members. The socio-economic history, the child lives in a pakka house. Tap water is the source of water which is used. They usually boil the tap water before drinking. They have good sanitary facilities. The father is a carpenter and has studied till 10th standard, and the mother is a homemaker who studied till 8th standard. The father's income is around 15,000 per month, which comes up with a per capita income of rupees 3,750 per month, and therefore they fall under the lower middle class category as per the modified Kuppuswamy scale. Also, I would like that there is no pet nuisance or any mosquito nuisance in and around his house.
Okay.
To summarize my history, a 2-year-old male child who is the firstborn of non-consanguineous parents, developmentally normal and immunized up to age, comes with the chief complaints of loose stools and vomiting with a history of faulty feeding habits. He has had similar episodes in the past. Therefore, the system involved is the gastrointestinal system, and the probable diagnosis as per the history is acute watery diarrhea. Therefore, I would like to do a detailed examination to see the signs of dehydration and any associated risk factors if present.
Some theory questions which may be asked in between. I will just tell you a few questions.
Yes.
How do you differentiate secretory from osmotic diarrhea?
So osmotic diarrhea is more of watery in consistency, whereas secretory diarrhea is more mucoidy in consistency, sir.
No.
So the
You're saying the opposite. It's okay, but no. See, osmotic means what? Some kind of a reducing substances or a disaccharide is not getting absorbed and it is coming out of the stools. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
So if you stop feeds, the diarrhea stops. What is that?
So can you repeat once again?
You stop feeds orally, the diarrhea stops. Is it osmotic or secretory?
Osmotic.
So you stop feeds till this patient has diarrhea. What is that?
Secretory.
Yeah, so that means the secretory, that's why Vibrio cholera is such a dangerous condition, that there will be so much of loss from the intestines without even taking any fluids or whatever is there inside, and the child will go in for severe dehydration. And you will have perianal excoriation where?
Lactose intolerance.
In osmotic diarrhea.
Yes.
Okay, and your stool osmolality will be higher in osmotic diarrhea, whereas in secretory diarrhea, your stool osmolality will be less.
Low. Yes.
So you should try to differentiate what is the type of diarrhea, because if it is secretory diarrhea, you need to give more fluids. Otherwise, you're going to lose the child.
Okay, sir.
And that is one point. How do you differentiate? What is the difference between chronic and persistent diarrhea?
Yes, sir. So the duration between the two is the same. Persistent diarrhea is of infectious etiology, whereas chronic diarrhea is of non-infectious etiology. So the 4 C's which you mentioned come into play in chronic diarrhea.
Okay, then this is what is parental diarrhea?
Sir?
Parental diarrhea. Parental diarrhea. Yes.
Sir, I'm not very sure, sir, but so I read it somewhere due to nasogastric tube, due to feeds which are given through nasogastric tube due to any other reason or surgery. So the child develops.
No. It's better to say you don't know. Forget it. So you come back. That's a homework for you. Okay. And then how do you classify diarrhea with electrolyte levels, sodium levels?
So with sodium levels?
Yes.
So I'm not very sure, sir.
Okay, Usama?
So I'm not sure.
Sodium levels, Usama. Sodium in it can go down, it can go up, or it can be normal. Now you tell me.
Sir, that is hyponatremia.
Yeah, that's all. Hyponatremic dehydration, isonatremic dehydration, or hypernatremic dehydration. Why do we want to differentiate these things?
Sir, I think
See, you have to mix ORS, no? With how much water you have to mix ORS?
1 liter.
Suppose the mother mixes it 100 ml enthusiastically and gives it faster to the child, they will develop hypernatremia. She takes a pinch of the ORS and dilutes in 2 liters of water. Hyponatremia. So these electrolyte imbalances are more because of the improper usage of oral rehydration solution rather than the disease per se. Most of the diarrheas are isonatremic because of the wrong methodology which the mother uses, because the doctor does not have the time to explain to the mother of how to use it. We'll end up with electrolyte imbalances. And one more important differentiation is in hypernatremic dehydration, the fluid from the cells will come out to balance the increased sodium levels. So it will mask your dehydration. So it's very difficult sometimes to find out whether you're dehydrated or not itself in hypernatremic dehydration. That is what we say a doughy appearance. No, you know what you mean by doughy? Clay-like, no? So if you put your hands on the abdomen or somewhere in the body, you have a doughy feeling. That means it is because of hypernatremic dehydration. That is why you classify these things. And because these electrolyte imbalances can cause seizures and altered sensorium. You'll try to give a lot of fluid, still the child will not have a proper sensorium. It is because of improper electrolytes. So along with fluids, what you should remember, you should also replace the correct amount of electrolytes. Yes, that's more important. Okay, yeah, go on, ma. Madam, sir, you want to add something in the history? She's done with history.
Yeah. Any other condition, underlying condition where you have difficulty in identifying the dehydration signs, especially the elasticity, skin elasticity?
If the child has edema or anasarca, then we'll have difficulty.
In common renal disorder, madam is asking. I'm giving you a clue.
Nephrotic syndrome.
Yes. Adana, madam, I don't know whether you...
Nephrotic, and also sometimes underlying malnutrition, especially kwashiorkor.
Yes, kwashiorkor. Yes, ma'am.
Having edema. Yeah.
Ilamaran sir, can we proceed? Yes, madam, sir is one. Sir is there. Please, sir, you can carry on.
Again, for differential diagnosis, in this child, what differential diagnosis you would like to consider?
So one is acute viral gastroenteritis. So the second is, it can be, so when we are seeing through, so it can be moderate acute malnutrition also. So when we proceed through the examination, we see. So it can be, so like since there was cow's milk, so it can be cow's milk protein intolerance also. It can also be any sort of food poisoning because there is a history of outside food intake.
Okay. Suppose this child has additionally persisting fever, high-grade fever, what all you would like to consider? That's not there, but if in this child there is a high-grade fever, what would you like to consider? With
so we can consider any bacterial etiology. That is, we can so typhoid can be considered. So we can also consider. Yes, sir. What, sir?
Salmonella, yeah.
Salmonella, yes, sir. Typhoid infection can be think of. So we can also think of, so like the child has fever, sir. So then, so like if he did not have fever, we could have thought, depending upon the stool, we can think of cholera infection as well. If only the stools were there and if the child was having the ice-watery stools.
Okay.
So we can also think of hepatitis infections, hepatitis A being more common, A and E. Then, so we could,
not
yes, sir. No, it's not B, A and E, sir.
A and E, okay.
E, yes, sir.
Okay.
And so if so, we can also think of any.
I said salmonella for a reason. When you said typhoid, so Shigella also. Yes, so Shigella is a common thing.
Yes, so if the child is having dysentery, so then we can think of Shigella or any other.
Suppose like any other infection is there, okay. It need not only be rotavirus or salmonella or Shigella. It can be a urinary tract infection if you have mentioned about that in your history as well.
History,
okay. Yes. In case the child has persistent fever, think of any systemic infections. Okay. Which can have this diarrhea. I'm not giving any clues, sir.
That is what I meant by parental diarrhea, Manisha. Sir is
yes, sir. Yes, I understood, sir. I just thought of it.
If they have a diarrhea because of some other systemic
because of any systemic infections, yes,
you call that as parental diarrhea.
Yes, I'll keep that in mind for now.
Okay.
Keep in mind that scrub typhus, dengue, anything can present with just a diarrhea.
In the present times, we can also think of the coronavirus. Sir.
Corona also will present like this. So in our area, no, scrub is quite rampant. So many times what happens, child with fever and dehydration, vomiting, no, they are managed as watery diarrhea when later on they are found to have a scrub infection, scrub typhus. All right. So
Yes.
if fever is not settling down, you'll have to think of infections, other infections also. Yeah, that's
Yes.
fine. Good. Yeah. So we are what you're planning to see some dehydration on examination, and what else you would like to see on examination? Just an overview.
So I'll try to evaluate the GI system in more depth, sir. I will see, look for the signs of dehydration. I will see the head to foot examination, sir, to look for any signs of malnutrition, the anthropometry, and any vitamin deficiencies. There signs of. So we have seen that the child has a history of pica. So I would like to look for any pallor is present or not, signs of anemia, basically, sir.
All right. So this is your objective of examination. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Examination, the general appearance of the child. The child was irritable, but was comfortably sitting on the mother's lap. Coming to the general examination, a pallor was seen. There was no itches, no cyanosis, no clubbing, no lymphadenopathy or no generalized lymphadenopathy, or no pedal edema was seen. In the head-to-toe examination, the hair was lusterless. The anterior fontanelle was closed. There was no abnormalities in the ear, nose, and throat. The chest, abdomen, and the bilateral upper and lower limbs were normal. There were no signs of vitamin deficiency. Looking for the signs of dehydration, skin turgor. The skin of the child goes back slowly. Eyes were sunken. Tears were present. The oral mucosa and the buccal mucosa appeared dry. The child was thirsty. The urine output was adequate. Therefore, from the signs of dehydration, the inference is the child is having some dehydration.
Can you just elaborate more? Okay, you have that picture. Elaborate more on how to do skin turgor.
Yes. So this is like my child is a 2-year-old child, but this is a picture which I've taken from other books. So we basically we hold the skin for 2 to 3 seconds and then leave it, and we see how quickly the skin goes back. So usually the skin which is pinched is the abdominal skin, and we see how fast the skin goes back. Usually it should be less than 2 seconds, sir. And if it is going back normally, then we say that there is no dehydration.
Where do you pinch the skin?
Sir, we do it in the umbilical area, usually near the anterior superior iliac spine, sir, near the
lateral abdominal wall at the level of umbilicus. Okay.
Okay,
so that's how you just a very clear way to answer that is a lateral abdominal wall at the level of umbilicus.
Okay, sir.
As we have already discussed, the skin turgor may not be useful when you have what type of dehydration?
So hypernatremic type of dehydration.
And when there is, as madam said, in some nutritional
there
disorders.
There is kwashiorkor. Yes,
where can this be exaggerated?
Sir, this can be exaggerated, sir, in any other so like skin abnormalities.
Underlying marasmus child develops acute gastroenteritis. Already in a marasmus child, the skin turgor will be lost, and further to that, you have added acute gastroenteritis, so it is going to be exaggerated. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
So should I proceed further?
Yes. Have you seen for capillary refilling time?
Yes, so yes, it's in my next slide. Sir.
Okay, go on.
So the vitals, the heart rate of the child is 108 per minute. The respiratory rate of the child is 30 per minute. The temperature of the child is afebrile. The BP of the child is 80 per 50 mmHg. The SpO2 is 99% in room air. The capillary filling time is less than 3 seconds. And the peripheral pulses, all pulses were felt.
Okay, fine. How do you do capillary refilling time?
So we with the help of a pointer finger, sir, we press on the sole of the child for 2 to 5 seconds, and then we leave it, and then we see how fast the bluishness or the pinkish appearance of the sole of the feet comes back.
And your BP blood pressure is 80/50. Is it normotensive, hypotensive? How do you find that out?
So this child is
for a 2-year-old child, 80/50 is, you are saying, is normotensive. How did you come to that inference?
So because there's a range, sir. So as per.
So probably you have to put it in the percentile charts. But for a random assessment, you can use a formula which is called a 70 plus age into 2.
Okay, sir.
Whenever you have a systolic blood pressure which goes below 70 plus age into 2, that is called as hypotension for children between 1 and 10 years.
Okay, sir.
So if this is a 2-year-old child, age into 2 is 4. So 70 plus 4 is 74. So if your blood pressure is below 74 systolic, it means it is hypotensive.
Okay, so I'll keep that in mind.
Is shock equivalent to hypotension, or you can develop shock in normotensive patients also?
So we can develop shock in normotensive patients also. So septic shock is a normal.
So remember that you cannot wait for hypotension for shock. Okay, you have to,
Shock,
there is
yes.
a phase of shock which is called as a decompensated shock.
Decompensated
If you
shock,
give
yes, sir.
fluids at that particular point of time, you will prevent the child from going into a compensated shock. So our idea as doctors is to prevent this child from going into a decompensated state of shock. So clues for that will be a tachycardia and your prolonged capillary refilling time. Don't wait for a cold extremity or a mottled extremity or a cynosed extremity. If any child has a severe tachycardia not related to the degree of temperature, that means you think that this particular child could be in shock. So if the temperature rises by 1 degree, how much does the heart rate rise?
So 10 to 15 mmHg for the child, sir.
Not 15, 10 beats per minute. Every degree rise in the temperature, it rises by 10 beats. Respiration?
Sir?
Respiration. Will the respiration increase rate with the temperature? Every degree rise in the temperature, respiratory rate will go up by 4.
Okay, sir.
So very high grade fever children may look tachypneic, but once you settle down the fever for the particular child, their respiratory rate will become normal. So before jumping into a conclusion of arrhythmias or other causes, always think of the normal reasons of tachycardia or bradycardia. Don't jump into arrhythmias.
Yes, sir.
Yes, madam, sir, can we proceed?
If the child is having temperature which is low, what else you suspect in this child, especially your child is having dehydration?
Ma'am, if the child's temperature is low, then what should we suspect? Dehydration is one thing. Then we can think of shock because cold clammy extremities, dehydration, shock are two differentials for low temperature.
I mean hypothermia. Here I am asking for the hypothermia, especially in a malnourished child having a dehydration. Suspect infection also, underlying sepsis. Okay.
Ma'am, infection will, ma'am, I have a doubt. Ma'am, will infection cause, ma'am, because usually, ma'am, we think infection is usually associated with high temperature. Ma'am, only in malnourished child should we suspect low temperature and infection?
Yes, it can present like that.
Malnourished children cannot react with fever because their immunity levels are so low and their subcutaneous fat is not present normally. So all the temperature regulation itself is abnormal in that particular child. Neonatal period and malnourished children can present with low fever, with hypothermia when they have infections. Newborns also have the same quality. You don't expect a very high fever in neonatal period. If they are hypothermic also, we suspect some amount of infections.
Okay, sir.
Child respiratory rate is 30, no?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, what if it is around 36?
So then the child is tachypneic.
Okay. So
yes, sir, because 2-year-old child.
With this findings, the temperature is normal, child is having dehydration and child is tachypneic. What will be your inference?
So since the child is dehydrated and so he's irritable also, like sir was mentioning, so we look for temperature. If the child has any temperature, then also it can cause tachypnea.
Good.
What complication of dehydration can cause tachypnea? That is what sir is asking.
So kalemia, so hypokalemia.
Severe dehydration. We said it's moderate, no? The child is having severe dehydration. Apart from all our sepsis, temperatures, okay, which can cause, what is the complication which will manifest with tachypnea?
Yes.
Child will
normal
be sick, lethargic and tachypneic, which gets corrected with rehydration.
So electrolyte disbalance, if there is, so basically associated with potassium imbalances.
Not potassium, it is with pH. What is the common
acidosis?
What acidosis? Yes, sir.
Sir, metabolic acidosis.
Metabolic acidosis. Okay, sir.
You can have acidotic breathing. Okay, and that can be more pronounced in certain other age groups and underlying metabolic disorders, anything. But commonly think of a straightforward metabolic acidosis if a child is tachypneic. And if that doesn't settle, no, you will have to think of a pneumonia. Okay. Especially with fever. Fever is settled, your dehydration is corrected, still the child appears tachypneic, you think of pneumonia and some other underlying conditions, but think of pneumonia because child is malnourished and all. No? So always keep infections first. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
And
So should I
common
proceed to
question
the
is,
next?
no, just one more,
Yes,
it's
sir.
an important thing.
Yes, yes,
Common
sir.
questions asked for undergraduates is about your IMNCA guidelines for tachypnea. When will you say child is tachypnic? That
So
all of
depending upon the
were
age of
really-
the child, so
Yeah.
60, 50, and 40 is what we say, sir.
Right.
So if it's greater than, yes, sir. So depending upon the age of the child, so these are the three values. And if, so for
Harsh,
example, if in a
Harsh, can you complete the answer?
So yes, so more than 60 for less than 11 months. And more, so 50 for around 2 years, and more than 40 for more than 2 years.
No.
That's wrong. Wrong.
Oh, sorry, 60
0
for
to
2 months, 60 for 2 months,
0 to
50 till
yes.
11 months, until
Yes.
2 years, it's 40.
No, 1 to 5 years.
Okay.
Say up to 2 months is 60, as sir is saying. 2 months to 1 year it is 50, and 1 to 5 years it is 40. Is it correct, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
the anthropometry, the weight for age of the child, it was observed that he was 9 kg. The expected for a 2-year-old child is 12 kg. So therefore, there's a 75% deficit in this thing. The Z score, it is in the range of -2 to 0 in the Z score. And the interpretation is mild to mild wasting or normal. Height for age, the child observed is 86.5 centimeter, whereas expected is to be 90 centimeter. In the Z score, it comes to be 0 to 2 in the 0 to 2 range. Therefore, it's normal. The mid-arm circumference, we observed with the child is 14.4 and the expected is 16.2, which is normal. And the head circumference of the child is 46.5 centimeter and the expected is 48. It is in the Z score, it's -1 to 0. Therefore, it is normal. The weight for the height of the child is in the range of -3 to 2. Therefore, it is moderate acute malnutrition.
What are the criteria to say it's to be a severe acute malnutrition?
Yes, sir. So as per the WHO criteria, sir, if it is below -3, and if there is the mid-arm circumference is below less than 11.5 centimeter, as well as if there is edema, bilateral edema.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And wasting, severe wasting.
Yes,
Four
sir.
criteria you
Edema
have
and
to
wasting.
talk about these things, because malnutrition is a very important part of your undergraduate education. So, and you should also know about the various Z scores. What do you understand by third percentile, 97 percentiles?
Yes, so below the third percentile, sir, is what we consider. So, for example, in the weight for height or weight for age, so below third percentile is like severely malnourished. And sir, if it's above the 97th percentile, sir, there is so we like above the 97th percentile, we usually say overweight, or so like further evaluation has to be seen.
Yeah,
for
here you
obesity.
should understand what you mean by standard deviations. Okay, 1 standard deviation,
Yes,
2 standard deviation, and 3 standard deviation. 3 standard
Yes, sir.
deviation is the peak. That means it's a very limited people population which are in this particular group. Then 2 standard deviation, it is a much more group. Then 1 standard deviation, it's a larger group. So if a person falls beyond or below the 3rd standard deviation, that means they are the very abnormal pathway. So that is how we should understand those things. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go on.
So this is the WHO chart for boys between the years of 2 to 5, and so we see that he falls in for the weight. He falls into the 0 to -2 range. There's an arrow mark here which shows where the child is lying. This is a height for age. Here also we see that the child's height for age is in between the range of 0 to -2. Weight for
there
height.
You said height is normal, Manisha. In anthropometry, you said height is 96.67 and 0 to +2.
0 to, yes,
here
sir.
you are saying it is 0 to -2 when you have plotted it on the chart. Something's wrong there. Okay, go on.
So weight for height, sir, it's between the -2 to -3 range. Coming to the systemic examination.
So with these anthropometric measurements, how will you classify wasting and stunting? What anthropometric measurement you will take for wasting?
So wasting, it's a weight for age, and stunting is
wasting. You don't take weight for age. That's why I asked you this question. It's always weight for height. Stunting is
height for age or length for age.
Both these things together, wasting and stunting, is suggestive of what type of malnutrition?
Severe acute malnutrition.
Chronic
Chronic etiology because of stunting.
Okay.
Yes, Systemic examination per abdomen, inspection, the umbilicus was seen in the midline. The skin over the abdomen was normal. All quadrants were moving equally with the respiration. There were no dilated veins, scars, or sinuses. Palpation, the abdomen was soft, non-tender, and no organomegaly was seen. Auscultation, percussion, no free fluid was seen in the abdomen. And auscultation, bowel sounds were heard and they were slightly increased.
What are the reasons of abdominal distension in a child with acute gastroenteritis?
In the child with acute, because of dehydration and electrolyte imbalances.
Tell me what electrolyte imbalance.
So here it is potassium, sir.
Hypokalemia can cause abdominal distension. Number 2.
Distension. So it can be due to over hydration also, so we can cause there can be
not a common cause. The second common cause is paralytic ileus or septic ileus. Okay, because of sepsis. Paralytic ileus because of hypokalemia can also cause the same thing.
Okay, sir.
Okay, go on.
So summarizing, a 2-year-old developmentally normal boy with loose stools and vomiting with faulty feeding habits comes to the OPD, and on examination we see that he has pallor, and we also see that he has moderate acute malnutrition with some signs of dehydration was seen. And I would like to propose the diagnosis of an acute watery diarrhea with some dehydration, and which is probable of a viral etiology. This is probably of viral etiology.
So your summary should be different and your diagnosis should be given separately. Okay, summarizing you can say a lot of things, but diagnosis you have to be very, very particular. It's a case of acute watery diarrhea with some dehydration, probably of viral etiology, and then you should add about the nutritional status of the child. All children who are less than 5 or 6 years, make sure that you add the nutritional status. That means according to the IAP, what is the percentage or the classification of malnutrition. Those things have to be added in your diagnosis, because you should also add about micronutrient deficiencies. These things you should not forget to add in the diagnosis.
Diagnosis, yes, sir.
You have a diagnosis page? Yeah.
Yes, sir, yes, I have it. So my diagnosis is acute watery diarrhea with some dehydration, moderate acute malnutrition, as well as nutritional anemia is seen. Investigations which I would...
Why are you concerned about the malnutrition and diarrhea? What is the
yes, ma'am. Malnutrition and diarrhea, ma'am, they run as a vicious cycle, ma'am. Because once there is, ma'am, diarrhea, the eating, the appetite of the child decreases, the absorptive power of the child decreases. Also, there's a change in the feeding habits of the child, ma'am. It leads to malnutrition. And ma'am, malnutrition itself can cause the dehydration because it is associated with immunocompromisation. And ma'am, it can also, malnutrition also causes an impact on the gastrointestinal epithelial of the child. So, ma'am, it's a vicious cycle, ma'am. One can cause the other, and the other causes.
Malnutrition can lead on to more complications and risks.
Complications also, ma'am.
Even infection or hypoglycemia or more severe dehydration, and the mortality is also high if the child is malnourished. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
We generally keep it as an indication for admission also. A child with an acute episode with moderate malnutrition also, no, it is better to admit. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that they don't get further into, you can give a nutritional supplementation and advice at the time of discharge. It is not a dangerous sign, not like kwashiorkor or something, but again, you can consider inpatient care. Okay.
Yes, sir. The investigations which I would like to do is a complete blood count, a peripheral smear, a routine urine examination, and serum electrolytes. If there would have been if I would have been suspecting a parasitic infection, then I would have also done stool culture or stool microscopic examination.
Why do you want to do a peripheral smear here?
Sir?
Why do you want
so
to
because
do a
we are suspecting iron deficiency anemia in the child, sir. So I would look for that, sir.
What picture you will get there?
So target signs are pencil-shaped cells
In
of
iron
RBC.
deficiency anemia, you will not get target cells. Very rarely you will get, but what is the common finding?
Microcytic hypochromic anemia.
What are the other causes of microcytic hypochromic anemia, Harsh?
So thalassemia.
Harsh is there? Is something wrong with your volume, Harsh? Huh?
Hello.
Tell me.
So HBC disease, thalassemia.
Okay. Lead poisoning and sideroblastic anemia. These are all the 4 important things that you suspect. So all hemolytic anemias are predominantly normocytic normochremic anemia, except this thalassemia. So if you are suspecting a hemolytic anemia and you have a microcytic hypochromic picture, more often it will be a thalassemia. And one more reason why you do a peripheral smear in a bacillary dysentery is to rule out hemolytic uremic syndrome. What cells you will develop there?
White cells, schistocytes.
Schistocytes. Okay. Why do you do a CBC? You want to know the
hemoglobin status and a general overview of the WBCs also.
In iron deficiency anemia, what will happen to the RDW?
So we'll see anisopoikilocytosis.
No,
that
red
is,
cell distribution width. What will happen to the red cell
so
distribution?
we'll see an altered RDW. So
what will happen to it? It will be increased. It will not be decreased. So
decreased,
clue for iron deficiency anemia is
because
your hemoglobin, your MCV and your MCHC will be low, but your RDW will be higher.
Increased, yes.
And with your complete blood count result, you can differentiate whether it is because of thalassemia also by seeing that hemoglobin will be low in thalassemia, but the RBC volume will be normal. Whereas in iron deficiency anemia, both your hemoglobin and your RBC volume will be lower. So that is a clue to differentiate whether the anemia is because of iron deficiency or thalassemia. That's what sometimes we call it as Mainz's index. If you go through the topic, you will know that. But easy way to find just with the complete blood count is through these things. And in your urine routine, you have seen and serum electrolytes. Okay.
Yeah. So the plan of treatment, it's plan B. That is, I will hospitalize the child and then I will basically give that for the deficit replacement. That is 75 ml per kg of ORS over a period of 4 hours. And I will see I'll watch for the signs of dehydration and improvement. If there's any, the signs to look for, the danger signs. I will also give him a maintenance dose of 100 to 200 ml per loose stools. And once the child is improving and if we see signs of improvement, we should start oral feeding as soon as possible. That is oral ORS. And in between, we should not stop giving him oral intake.
What are the limitations of ORS? Which group of children you cannot give ORS in acute gastroenteritis?
So I'm not very sure.
Paralytic ileus.
Yes,
we should not.
If they have paralytic ileus, number 2 is what? When they have severe dehydration. Can you opt for oral fluids when you have severe dehydration? You should always opt for
IV fluids.
So severe dehydration, paralytic ileus, and excessive vomiting, continuous vomiting are all limitations of giving. You don't say contraindications because ORS is a very wonderful drug. So we don't use the word contraindications because people will be very apprehensive and stop using ORS. So we say limitations of using oral rehydration solutions are these 3 conditions: when they have severe dehydration, when they have paralytic ileus, and when they are persistently vomiting.
Yes, sir.
What is the principle behind using this ORS?
Ma'am, basically, when a child is having gastroenteritis or watery diarrhea, ma'am, there is sodium as well as chloride loss. And ma'am, all the channels are affected except the sodium and the glucose channel, ma'am. So therefore, when we are giving ORS, the normal ORS is for the WHO guideline, ma'am. It has a concentration, the osmolarity of sodium and glucose are in the ratio of 1:1. So therefore, when we give ORS, along with the glucose, the sodium is also taken by the gastrointestinal cells, as a result of which good dehydration is corrected.
What is the osmolarity of the recent ORS that we have, Manisha?
295, sir. 245.
246. Yes. Previously 245. It was
311.
Why was it reduced?
So because there was so symptoms, the children were usually showing
hypoosmolarity.
Because of the increased osmolarity, the purge rate was more higher and the volume of the stools were not coming down. Why many of the patients try to avoid ORS is because after they give ORS, the child continues to purge a lot because of the increased osmolarity. So that's why they reduced the ORS so that the volume of the stools had become better. What do you understand by Rizomal, Usama?
Yes.
I'm not sure, but it is
this
a
is
different
given for
composition.
malnutrition children who are developing acute gastroenteritis. So that solution is called rehydration solution for malnutrition. So you go through that when you find time. It is called Rizomal. And there is one more thing which we usually call as super ORS, where your glucose is being replaced by starch or rice. Rice-based ORS is called super ORS. All these replacements can reduce the volume of stool output. so that the parents will be more happier, because they are worried only about the loose stools and not signs. We will be speaking science, but sometimes they will want the symptoms to become better. So you should have a balance between science and the parental anxiety. Yes, go on.
So this was my last slide.
What
Thank
what
you,
other
guys.
mineral you will provide in your child?
Zinc supplementation I will give the child.
How much? What is the dose?
20 mg per kg.
How long duration?
Ma'am?
How long do you give?
Ma'am, I cannot hear you, ma'am.
Yeah, no, somebody is just switched on their.
Dr. Selvakumar, please unmute now, please.
Okay, go on, ma. Zinc, madam is saying zinc. You should complete it, Manisha.
Yes,
Zinc,
20
how much, how long?
mg per kg.
No, not per kg. The total dose itself is 20 mg.
20 mg. Okay, sir.
For
I
how
was
many
little,
days?
I'm not there.
It's okay.
So I'm not
14
very
days.
sure of the
14
duration,
days, sir.
sir.
You, some are saying it's to be given for 14 days.
14 days.
Okay. Below 6 months,
So I'm not sure of the dosage.
10 mg. You just reduce it by about 10
Okay,
milligram and
sir.
again give it for the same 14 days. What is the
14
idea
days.
of giving
Okay.
zinc, Osama?
So
The zinc is usually lost during the diarrhea because during diarrhea, zinc deficiency usually occurs. Plus, it will supplement the healing of the gastrointestinal mucosa.
So it basically reduces the frequency of stools and reduces the duration of diarrhea and prevents recurrences. 3 things you should say. Very clear. Are you clear? It reduces
yes,
the
sir.
frequency, reduces the duration, and reduces the recurrences. Very simple. What disease will happen if there is zinc deficiency?
So I know
You will have
dermatitis or something.
what dermatitis?
So I forgot the name. So acanthosis dermatitis.
Not acanthosis. Acro.
So I said acro. So acrodermatitis was.
Acrodermatitis enteropathica.
Enteropathica. Yes, yes.
Okay. Which vitamin deficiency can cause chronic diarrhea? Along with zinc, sometimes we also supplement folic acid. Okay, folic acid deficiency also can cause recurrent attacks of chronic diarrhea. Okay, so you should remember that when somebody has a very long duration of diarrhea, sometimes they will respond to giving folic acid.
Okay, sir.
What organisms are common in immunocompromised children?
So Cyclospora, Isospora,
correct.
And Palentidium coli is also seen. So.
And Cryptosporidium also. So that is why sometimes in immunodeficient patient, what prophylaxis do we give them for HIV patients to avoid these infections?
So sulfo, so SMPTX.
Yes, good. So you are aware cotrimoxazole and trimethoprim is given for these conditions. Which bacterial diarrheal infection can progress to Guillain-Barré syndrome?
So?
Guillain-Barré syndrome. This particular infection.
Yes. Campylobacterium.
Campylobacter jejuni. That is one thing. These are some short questions which I would like you to know. So it's probably of interest. Okay. And traveler's diarrhea is caused by which organism?
Giardia.
Enterotoxigenic E. coli. ETEC. You give prolonged duration of antibiotics and long hospital stay. What organism will be the
Clostridium difficile.
Causing what?
Necrotizing E. colitis.
Pseudomembranous
colitis.
So whenever the child is on long periods of antibiotics and hospital stay, they may be having chances of acquiring this particular organism and developing pseudomembranous colitis. And one diarrheal infection can mimic an appendicitis, that is Yersinia. Okay, if there is an infection with Yersinia, they will mimic a pseudo appendicitis. So these are all some, some pointers which I would like to say. Probably not for your exams, but for you to know in your day-to-day practice. Madam, sir?
Do you routinely advise antimicrobials for a diarrheal child?
No, ma'am. We usually do not prefer prescribing antimicrobials, ma'am, unless it is proven to be of any bacterial etiology.
Okay.
And we prefer to have stool culture first to start with antibiotics also.
Okay. What are the extraintestinal manifestations of diarrheal organisms?
So can you repeat your question?
Extra-intestinal manifestations of diarrheal diseases.
So
See,
I'm
if
not
it is
very sure.
amoeba, entamoeba, histolytica, what extra-intestinal manifestations you will have?
So we can have hepatomegaly, sir, if there is any
Amoebic
cyst
liver
formation.
abscess. Okay,
Abscess.
so I
Yes,
told
sir.
you now, no, Campylobacter can cause Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Guillain-Barré
You
syndrome.
can have a post-reactive arthritis following some diarrheal episodes. So these are all a common group of conditions which are called as extra-intestinal amoebiasis. Okay,
Okay, sir.
sir, Ilamaran sir.
Sir has raised
Sir,
his hand.
hello.
Sir, Vanga sir, Soundar sir, good evening,
Because
welcome to the show.
I got a few questions. The
Yes,
stool
sir.
microscopy, did she mention? Stool microscopy?
She didn't mention, she didn't put it in the slide, sir, but she said if there is a history of amoebiasis or dysentery, I will go for stool microscopy.
Okay, yeah, in stool, this is to the presenter. How
Yes,
the stool
sir.
microscopy can differentiate a viral diarrhea and a bacterial diarrhea?
So depending upon the type of stool, sir, and also, sir, if there is any blood in the stools or red blood cells which are seen in the stools, it's more towards a bacterial origin. Whereas if it's not, then it will be a viral origin, sir.
Okay, these are all macroscopic, I'm asking simply, specifically stool microscopy. What will you find as an evidence for bacterial diarrhea?
Is that neutrophils?
Yeah, so more than 10 neutrophils per, it is one question. In what clinical setting you will suspect lactose intolerance? Suppose the child comes with, persistent diarrhea, recurrent diarrhea. What are
Yes,
the
sir.
clinical things you would like to look
So-
for in the case of lactose? Yeah.
So perianal excoriation is a very classical clinical sign which is usually seen, sir, if the child has a history of persistent
Good.
diarrhea with perianal excoriation. I would look for secondary lactose intolerance.
Okay,
Flatulence
that is
will be
good.
there.
And
More flatulence will be
history,
there.
yeah. Every time they feed milk, immediately there will be an explosive, noisy, even frothy stools can be there. What is the reason for perianal excoriation in a case of lactose intolerance?
So it is due to continuous passage of stools and irritation around the perianal region, sir.
Reducing substances are also there in the
Also
Additionally,
released in the stool, sir.
Because additionally, the undigested lactose also become lactitol, which is slightly acidic. That stool will be acidic pH. That also causes some mild erosion in that area. That is one thing. Okay. In a case of diarrhea, when would you like to add antibiotics?
So depending upon the cause, sir, once if I'm, so like in viral etiology, I will not give any antibiotics, sir. If it's more towards, for example, so if it's like dysentery or any other bacterial cause, then I would like to give antibacterial or antimicrobial to be more specific.
Okay, otherwise, when will you suspect bacterial etiology in a diarrhea? Suppose clinically, even before doing testing, what are all the other clinical things you can suspect a bacterial diarrhea?
Yes, sir. So the child might present with fever, sir. Also the duration of the symptoms are between like the symptom and when the child, what time the child is having the problems, and so also the type of stool, so blood in stool. So these are a few history-wise which are pointing towards bacterial origin.
Okay, if it is colitis straight away, you will think of antibiotics. But suppose if it is still a secreted diarrhea, because E. coli also can cause secreted diarrhea, cholera also can cause secreted diarrhea. So, what are the other things you would consider in starting an antibiotic even before we get the test in the case of secreted diarrhea? Okay, already you told one is a hectic fever, other the child is very looking very sick. Of course, in a malnutrition child, we may have to consider antibiotics. Okay, can you tell some common differences between small bowel diarrhea and large bowel diarrhea?
Yes, sir. So small bowel and large bowel. So one is the organisms which are causing. So they are different. Also, sir, in small bowel, like in large bowel diarrhea, so the most common symptom will be only stools, and in small, like that's in large bowel, and in small bowel it is more of vomiting as well as stool passage. So also in there'll be more bulgosmy, and so the type of stools will also be a little different. So
tenesmus is usually indicated to large bowel.
Tenesmus is large bowel, yes.
So the more water, less stools is small bowel. less water, more fecal matter is large bowel.
Large
Additionally, vomiting favors small bowel diarrhea because there will be some acute gastroenteritis. And tenesmus or blood or mucus, these things will suggest large bowel diarrhea. Okay, good. The smell has nothing to do because every time the patient will come, sir, it is very smelly and all. Generally, the smell doesn't have much significance as differentiating feature between viral and bacterial. But even then, if the stool becomes very, very offensive smell, can you tell a few, which organism you might suspect? But the stool is very sticky, large volume, preceded by a very bloating of abdomen. So which organism causes these things? Malnourished child, giardiasis. Because fat malabsorption, steatorrhea will cause a very bad offensive smell. Okay, good. You did well. Thank you. And okay, one more thing. Zinc helps in diarrhea. How does it help in diarrhea? Can you elaborate?
So it promotes epithelial re-epithelialization of the gastrointestinal tract. Also, sir, it prevents, it reduces the amount of stool, sir. So it is for both like immediate management as well as it helps in the immediate recovery of the child.
Okay, one is it helps in the repair of the villi and it also helps in electrolyte and water absorption. Okay, yes. Good. Yes, good. Okay, good.
You can repeat what sir said. Ramanathan sir said.
Yes, it decreases the frequency and duration and the volume of that.
And the recurrence.
Recurrence also.
So,
Shall we ask more questions, sir, or we'll?
I don't know.
I have some questions. If we have time, we can ask.
I mean, you have another half an hour to go. You can just. It's your day.
You can ask some doubts if you have. I have some questions. I will just keep it if necessary. Okay.
Yes, sir. So should I stop presenting my screen, sir?
No, you have done with your presentation, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This
you
was
can
my
stop
last
that now. It's more of an interaction now that we are having.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Rajendran, sir, would you like to add something?
Manisha, how will you prevent the diarrhea? What are the counseling the parents? No, so how will you counsel regarding prevent diarrhea?
Yes, sir. Sir, first of all, sir, bottle feeding, sir, like in my case, we had seen that there was a case of bottle feeding, sir. We will not, I'll ask the mother to not do that, sir. As well, sir, like the most common, sir, the spoon and bowl method should be practiced for feeding the child. Also, sir, like since the child is a 2-year-old already on a mixed diet, sir, the basic C's, 5 C's of cleanliness of hand, food, the plates, etc. should be followed. The mother should wash their hands before feeding the child, before using the washroom, after using the washroom. So proper sanitation of each and every food material should be done. Proper covering of the food material before feeding the child.
How long you have to ask the mother to boil the water? Sometimes they're coming from rural area, you won't get the water dog or whatever things, a filter, you won't get it. What's the advice to give the mother to boil the water?
So your voice is breaking a little for me. So
no, what advice regarding boiling the water? How do you tell the mother? You wait pannunga. You tell them locally, no? Then only they will understand.
Yes, so I'll ask the mother to boil the water for approximately 5 to 7 minutes, sir, till a whitish patch is seen, sir. Like basically bubbles as well as whitish patch is seen in the utensil.
So basically, we say roll boiling. We say.
Okay, what kind of water you should use for mixing ORS?
So water should be at room temperature for mixing ORS, sir. 1 liter water for 1 packet, room temperature.
That is called as potable water.
It need not be hot water. It can be just fresh drinking
It's
water.
just normal temperature, which is not hot, not cold. This is called potable water.
Okay, sir.
What about probiotics? Is there any use of probiotics in acute water diarrhea? And can you tell names of a few probiotics generally used?
We usually give lactobacillus probiotics. It is proven to be helpful because it promotes the growth of the normal flora of the intestine. So yes, if necessary, I would prescribe probiotics. Lactobacillus and other lactobacillus species are usually given.
No, actually, the role of probiotics in acute water diarrhea is very, very limited, except in chronic diarrhea or antibiotic associated diarrhea. That is why I specifically asked this question, right? So probiotics has very little role in acute water diarrhea. Okay.
As an undergraduate, need not tell about that probiotic. Okay, that's very important.
Just one thing you remember: the mantra of treating diarrhea is what? One word.
ORS.
That's your day. If you know that for today, we are more than happy. All your prescriptions in the future should have ORS as the first prescription and not ofloxacin and metronidazole. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Here up the remote area, the calling child is having diarrhea 8 to 10 times. So they're calling early morning or midnight. What's the advice you'll give?
So basically, I will ask the mother to give starchy rice water with a little bit of salt, and sugar can also be added to given to the child. So homemade ORS is what is usually prescribed.
How much how will you prepare that homemade ORS?
So it is basically in the addition of water, salt, and sugar, sir. So I forgot the number of tablespoons. So like there is a particular tablespoon.
No, they won't understand what is tablespoon also. No, they use your fingers and tell them. That's all.
Any of you that Ash or Osama?
Yeah, Osama.
Homemade ORS. What's a homemade ORS? Definitely the parents may not know. Okay, you have to advise them how much you have to add.
You see this, Osama? This is for salt. This is for sugar. Tell me now. Tell sir.
This composition,
internals will usually give clues for your exam. So I am an alumnus of Rameshwara Medical College, so I will act like an internal for you.
1 pinch of salt, 3 tablespoons of sugar.
Yeah, you have to ask the parents to boil the water 1 liter. You tell the quantity of water. That's 1 liter. 1 pinch of salt and 8 pinch of sugar. That's usually that advice. Okay. So you have to okay, that's a prevention. Another thing is what's a primordial prevention?
Primordial, so the mother should be taught how to breastfeed properly. So that should be done at the level of the hospital only before discharging the mother. So basically there is a proper way how the baby should be breastfed. So also the mother, breastfeeding should be, exclusive breastfeeding should be promoted till 6 months. The mother should be taught about how important is breast milk and why it should be given. So then after that, sir, the way how so complementary feeding should be started after 6 months. How the child should be complementary fed is to be taught to the mother. That is, one food at a time should be introduced into the diet. And so the mother should the breastfeeding should be continued till 2 years of age. So the normal development of brain should have happened. So 2 years of age, the mother should be breastfeeding the baby. Also, if the mother is due to any reasons, if the mother is not being able to breastfeed the baby directly, then extraction of the breast milk should be done and given to the baby. So these levels of this should be taught to the mother.
What's the exclusive breastfeeding and what's the complementary feeding?
So exclusive breastfeeding is that only breast milk should be given to the child and nothing else. That is not even water. During that is for 6 months of duration of baby's age. And in case the baby suffers any infection or any other problem, due to which any antibiotic or vitamins have to be supplemented, that comes in the medicine, and that is not that is still exclusively breastfeeding. And complementary breastfeeding is that should be started after 6 months of age, along breast milk, along with household substances like porridge or mashed vegetables should be given.
So that's not replacing the breast milk. That's very important.
Breast milk, yes.
And primordial prevention, you have to tell that vaccine. That's a very important thing. Is
yes.
That's word you have to tell. So you have to do the rotavirus vaccine. Speaking before 6 months, some product they're telling up to 8 months. It's another thing. Breastfeeding one thing. Another one is rotavirus vaccine. Okay, oral vaccine.
So you replace milk, it is supplementary feeding, and if you add on to milk, it is complementary feeding. So that's the difference between these two terminologies. One is supplementary, another one is complementary. So we prefer complementary rather than supplementary.
Yeah, Dr. Manisha, there is something called a first criteria when you start complementary feeds. How the complementary feed should be there. There is something called there is an abbreviation called a FASS, AFASS, a first criteria. Do you know that?
Okay, sir. No, sir, I'm not very aware of that.
No, that means affordable, acceptable, feasible, and affordable, sustainable, safe. A complementary feed should be culturally acceptable. It should be affordable. It should be easily preparable. Same time, it should be sustainable also, and finally safe. So that is called a first criteria when it comes to complementary feeds.
Okay, sir, I'll keep that in mind, sir.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it is
that criteria is also used when you have a mother who is a HIV positive mother and you want to feed a baby, a HIV positive mother who wants to breastfeed. So the mother has to think of these conditions. In our country, we still go for breastfeeding, even if the mother is positive. So
HIV positive, yes, sir.
Those things, as sir said, this criteria should be fulfilled.
Okay, sir.
That preparing ORS, okay, 1 liter of ORS they're preparing, okay. So how will you counsel the mother to give the ORS? That's very important thing. So you are telling make a preparation of ORS. Okay, there is a two type of assays that you can mix it low molecular, that low osmolality ORS, that 200 ml you can mix it, one thing. Another one is 1 liter. How will you ask the mother to give the ORS?
So I'll ask the mother to give the ORS, so like asking the baby to give like in small sips, sir. And like once the baby if he's being able to take more properly, so then to increase it slowly.
That's you're telling that clearly. You have to tell the mother. Okay, the 10 ml also, 20 ml also you can give, even half tumbler also baby can take. What's your advice? You have to tell the mother clearly. You have to ask the mother to give 1 spoon 1 minute. That's very important thing. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Giving large quantity, what happened? The child go for vomiting. Okay. Sometimes many times the ORS, the taste may not palatable to the baby. Okay. So may not like a lot of preparations are there. May not like it. Okay. You have to inform the mother 1 spoon 1 minute. That's advice you have to always tell. Okay. Right.
Okay, sir.
There's some ORS gel and also, I mean, just for additional thing, some ORS gel and all you commonly see. Is it advisable to use? It's
so
a trade
ORS L.
Not know.
No, these are all some over-the-counter drink-like things, which is not WHO.
So they come in Tetra Pak, if I'm not wrong.
Yes,
so.
yes.
Like I've seen a few Tetra Paks.
So probably you're practicing now already.
When we go to the
presenter, how much ORS should be given for each loose tools? Because
so for a
so
100 to 200 ml per loose tool, sir.
For a small child and a bigger
depends
child,
on the age. It depends on the age.
Yes. So for my child, like in my presentation, so the age of the child was 2 years. So as for that is what I'm saying, sir.
Okay. But okay, for a 9-month-old child, then how much do you give?
So depending upon the age, sir, depending upon the age, I will multiply it into 75, sir. That is like how we usually follow, and then that much ORS I will give. That is approximately.
No, that is for some dehydration.
Some dehydration. Sir is asking for every loose tool.
So 50 to 100 ml per loose tool.
Yeah, small baby, that is infancy, 50 we give 50 to 100. More than 1 year, give 100 to 200 ml.
Yeah, that's what.
Otherwise, you can say 10 to 20 ml per kg per loose tool.
Per kg.
That's also
okay, sir.
Okay.
You know, it's National Diarrhea Control Program. What is National Diarrhea Control Program?
Yes, ma'am.
National Diarrhea Control Program. Do you know anything about that?
No, ma'am, I'm not very sure about it. I know that there is one the national program which is combined with diarrhea as well as pneumonia for children, and under that there is adequate that also comes under 3 levels, that is primary, secondary, and tertiary. Ma'am, I do not know in depth about it.
This was launched in 1980. Its main idea was to improve the knowledge for the mother and the caretaker regarding the oral rehydration therapy, especially to prevent the dehydration related mortality.
Even now we are following that in government hospitals, madam. We have a diarrhea control week. We celebrate a week and we distribute a lot of zinc tablets and ORS solutions during that week. And we have a separate counter where we will teach the mothers to mix ORS and start giving the ORS to the children.
Yes, sir.
So we are IAP. We are celebrating ORS week also. Okay. So ORS week also we are celebrating a lot of things. Dr. Ramanathan, anything you want to add? Any points?
No, sir. We had a good academic session, sir, with the help of your platform. And they did well, sir. As I mean, in front of so many people unknown to them, still they are able to communicate well and they performed well. And I congratulate all the three of you and especially the presenter for having taken pains to present this case. Hope we have been able to guide you in a proper manner. And please leave your feedbacks to us so that we will improve ourselves the next time. Thanks a lot.
It was very helpful, sir.
Yes, sir. When we like the sessions, especially with the presenters doing so well, so happy with the presented. Thank you for providing this opportunity.
Dr. Sarla?
Yes, sir.
I ask one doubt.
Yeah, please go on, Usama.
Yeah, sir. For like, we are giving too much antibiotics to a child. So, like, how to prevent pseudomembranous enterocolitis? Because we knew that it can happen because of antibiotics.
Don't give antibiotics unnecessarily. That is the only solution.
No, sir. Like, it is the required need of our, because maybe some other diseases we are giving it. So if we are suspecting that child may going for it or child is having this, so what we should?
Fortunately, this entity is a very rare entity, Usama. It's not a very common entity which we see every day in and day out. Probably it's a very, very rare entity and sometimes it goes undiagnosed also. But just the take-home message is at least try to restrict the number of days of your antibiotic. Don't jump with the polypharmacy and just keep on treating them for weeks together before you have a particular diagnosis. So whenever you're unable to diagnose, please refer them to a center where they can diagnose the patient properly instead of just keep changing the drugs every day and landing the patient in trouble.
So actually, otherwise it's called antibiotic-induced diarrhea. Okay. So I think as Dr. Ramanathan rightly said, avoid antibiotic unnecessarily. Okay, that's why that now a stewardship of antibiotic, lot of program also we are organizing. Another thing is already we discussed diarrhea per se, and almost 90% need not give antibiotic. So one thing is as high fever and blood is stool, I think you can consider antibiotic. That's also you have to be very carefully. You have to choose the antibiotic. And as you said, how will you treat that pseudomembranous colitis? That's a different topic. Okay, that's why you have to use vancomycin, metronidazole, a lot of things are treatment wise. I think undergraduate per se you need not know. Okay, your aim is primordial prevention. You have to avoid unnecessary antibiotic. That's you have to learn. And you have to document some conditions like cyclosis and producing acute dysentery, we can use antibiotic. That's also cephalosporin, we can use it. And I think unnecessary antibiotic you have to avoid. Okay.
No, I think he was asking antibiotics used for different things when they cause antibiotic associated diarrhea. But I think a co-prescription with probiotics might be of use. That is the only thing. But altogether, we should not be using any, otherwise we call judicious use of antibiotics in any infection. That is the only solution. But, sometimes it is unavoidable. So when you have to use antibiotics for a longer time, maybe a co-prescription with probiotics might be useful to the patient. That is what I think. Okay. Okay.
Dr. Ilamar, yeah.
Sir, I'm done, sir, with the questions.
Madam.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Actually, I appreciate the presenter Manisha and also the other learners, Usama and Harsh. I thank IAP State Chapter for giving the opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think Manisha, you presented nicely. I think it's an excellent presentation. Okay, that's I think you are like postgraduate level you are presenting. It's really appreciate your presentation. And on behalf of IAP TNSC, I thank Dr. Ramanathan, the head of the department pediatrics from Annamalai. I think he's one of the good teacher, and I viewed some of his classes also. He's excellent teacher. I think we are really thankful to you, Dr. Ramanathan.
Thank you, sir. It's our pleasure, sir.
Yeah. And another thing is Dr. Ilamaran is Secretary IAP Pondicherry. I think He was and he's an active person in IAP, and he's a professor of pediatrics in Mahatma Gandhi Medical College. I thank Dr. Elamarn also, and I think I thank Dr. Sarla and Dr. PRC sir, who has given consent for this program for conducting undergraduate case proceedings.